It is thought that during the 1800s, a being known as the Sculptor clawed its way into our realm of existence, its arrival in Louisiana going seemingly unnoticed. Its origins uncertain, its intentions malicious, and its power unimaginable. The Sculptor corrupted our reality to suit its own nefarious purpose. If not for the intervention of the American Hunters Association, it's likely the Sculptor's corruption would have consumed the entire world. The exact date of the Sculptor's arrival is unclear, yet by the mid-1890s, its influence had spread throughout Louisiana, causing corruption and disease to sink into the Bayou. The populace slowly falling to infection, with madness taking hold, brother turned on brother, many committing unspeakable acts. Hysteria drove some to suicide, fear struck, taking the very hearts of men and women alike, and even those not afflicted by the corruption committed acts that damned their souls. Governor Foster believed it to be nothing more than an epidemic of the poor, an affliction of a minority of undesirables, a malady of the idle. He couldn't have been more wrong. His own concerns about the re-election saw him dismiss what was happening in the Bayou. The darkness spreading from the heart of the Bayou seemed unstoppable, and insatiably hungry for more corpses. Even reports of the dead coming back to life gained no interest from the local authorities. Yet rumours began to circulate throughout Louisiana of monsters hunting those who ventured into the Bayou after dark. The Sculptor was now tightening its grip on Louisiana, yet hope remained. The American Hunters Association had existed in one form or another, in secret, since the 1600s. Its purpose, to hunt down and exterminate all malevolent supernatural beings, while keeping the existence of such creatures a secret from the public. Dr. Philip Huff Jones, the director of the Louisiana branch of the AHA, sent an investigator to the Bayou. Palella was a seasoned hunter whose investigations had led to numerous successful hunts, including the tracking and banishment of a poltergeist. His report suggested there was indeed a vile entity at work, a sculptor of extraordinary power. Upon hearing this news, Dr. Philip Huff Jones began making plans to fight back the hordes of the dead, to banish the vile creations of the Sculptor, and to put an end to the Sculptor itself. Huff was a cunning man, and used his guile to gain the support from local government and law enforcement, which meant them looking the other way and not interfering with his work. He secured contracts with weapons manufacturers and began increasing the presence of hunters in Louisiana. Although the Sculptor had burrowed its roots deep into the heart of the Bayou, Huff was confident he could hold back the tide. Dr. Philip Huff Jones already held a respected position as the superintendent of the asylum at Jackson, something he used to great effect during the war against the Sculptor. During his search for a solution to the scourge spreading across Louisiana, Huff turned to sinister methods, using the patients as test subjects, and with the assistance of his most trusted employees, he committed vile acts many deemed torture. Yet Huff did not see his research as insidious. He saw it as a necessity. Whether he was indeed acting from noble intentions, or had somehow become corrupted by the powers to be gained from the Sculptor, is unclear. However, as the number of patients dwindled, it became clear Huff needed new test subjects. In his vain ambition, he had many hunters sent into his charge. Some had lost their minds already, due to the horrors they witnessed, others too injured to continue the fight. There were even initiates who failed the mysterious tests of the AHA, who were then sent off to Huff. The only thing people knew is that once someone was sent to the asylum, all that remained were their hollowed screams echoing out from the asylum. Philip Huff Jones had been successful in initially growing the ranks of the AHA in Louisiana. Even the infamous Irishwoman, called Lynch, was working with him. Dedicated hunters, such as Sheriff Hardin, who had been recruited by Lynch, took it upon themselves to begin their own recruitment. Hardin established his base of operations in the Bayou at one of the prisons, and even went as far to recruit inmates. However, when his ranks started thinning, he too crossed the line, and for the greater good began recruiting orphans, most of whom died in their first foray into the Bayou. Those who showed too much skill at killing and could potentially cause problems in the future were killed by Hardin himself. While many of the methods employed by the members of the AHA would be deemed heinous and unforgivable, ultimately, these acts were committed to drive back a far more malevolent evil. However, the Sculptor was not idle. The plague was rapidly spreading and corrupting the inhabitants of the Bayou, bringing the dead back to life as seemingly mindless grunts. Yet, this was not the only creation of the Sculptor. It had begun forging more dangerous monsters. Creatures like the Hive, a woman whose chest cavity had been burst open by an explosive hive of infected hornets. Her screams, striking fear into the bravest of men. Or the Armored and Meathead. It had even begun turning wild dogs into hellhounds, packs of vicious animals that stalked the bayou, ready to tear apart the unwary. Each of these creations were designed to serve a purpose, yet what these purposes were remained unclear. While these monsters roamed freely throughout the bayou and taking the life of many hunters, they were not invincible. Harold Black began studying the monsters of Louisiana, making notes of their strengths and weaknesses. His research slowly circulated among the hunters and began to aid them in their fights against the Sculptor and its creations. Despite their best efforts, the men and women of the AHA still struggled to hold back the growing threat. The Sculptor had begun to forge monsters from the very depths of human nightmares. These creatures would become a target for the hunters. The malevolent beings, known as the Butcher, a giant monster of a man, whose affinity for fire left many charred remains in its wake. The Spider, an amalgam of human body parts twisted into the form of a spider, spitting venom from the shadows of its lair. And the Assassin, a bug-infected entity with the ability to separate itself. And finally, Scrapbeak, believed to not necessarily be the work of the Sculptor, but no less malicious in its intent. The malformed body of Avis Wyndham, a veteran of the Civil War, left in eternal torment. The AHA decided to put out bounties on these creatures, paying small fortunes to any hunter who could prove they banished them back to the realm of the Sculptor. Yet more and more rifts kept appearing in the bayou, and as soon as one of these creatures was banished, it began clawing its way back into our realm. It is when hunters realized they could gain fame and fortune if the Sculptor was never caught, that things started to turn against Huff and the AHA. The endless cycle of bounties and banishment, a limitless source of work and money for those skilled or foolhardy enough to continually venture into the bayou. The darker side of human nature began to take hold, and small skirmishes broke out between hunters, each man and woman fighting for gold, rather than the greater good. The events that began to unfold would tear the American Hunters Association apart, leaving the Sculptor free to spread across America.